it depends what I'm pitching, really. If I'm pitching to someone who knows that I work from home and it's a fairly small project, I sort of just pitch as senior designer. Sounds a bit stupid because it's only me, but I do put senior designer because I just think it's, otherwise they might get the wrong impression. I'm not a director, so I can't put that. I don't have anything that goes out on my emails at all. The only time I do it is if someone's not familiar with me, and I sort of need to put something so that it doesn't look like I'm the tea girl at some some creative agency or something. But generally I don't really put anything. I don't generally have a need to.
So what do you do day to day? What do you class yourself as then, even though you don't give out a job title?
I would class myself as a web developer who designs. Because I literally am split down the middle. I do completely half and half. I work for a lot of agencies where I just do the Photoshop templates, and then they send them off to other countries to be outsourced and to be developed. Or I get the other side of the coin where I do the development for people's flat Photoshop documents. So I literally am split down the middle. I don't do more of one or the other. I prefer development sometimes, depending on what mood I'm in. If it's using Expression Engine, I love development because I'm learning that at the moment, and I get really into it. And I find trying to do static sites without Expression Engine is now really strange. If that makes sense, because I think that I've got the functionality to do something when I haven't. So you get kind of used to building in a certain way, but I'm literally split down the middle. That's probably really weird because a lot of people do one or the other, but I started off in design and then went into development. So
I think it's one of those things where you work for yourself, you work at home, you've kind of got to, haven't you? You've got to do a little bit of everything.
Yeah, I think so. I think, especially because I started my business when I was 19, so you have to learn to wear so many different hats all at once. You're your own accountant. You have to do all the admin for your business. You have to do customer services. You know, you're practically everything wrapped up into one, and you go through this real learning curve at the beginning of how to do different things, and you get things wrong, and you just get yourself into a pattern where you learn what fits and what fits your clients, and you go from there. So
you started RyanHavoc Design when you were 19.
Yeah.
Was that your first job? That's usually the question I ask next. What did you? We go back to the beginning. Where did you start? So.
I started off in. I actually started off doing theatre and education, which was where you go around to different schools and you teach kids about drug and sex education and all different types of sort of social stuff that kids get taught in schools. I did that for a couple of years, and then I went into casting, which was sort of a similar thing. Casting is if you any kid on an advert, that's casting, where you send them off to go for an audition, and then if that's so I was in that, but I ended up doing the company website more than actually sending people for castings, and I ended up earning more money out of doing the company website because it was all very commission based. If the kid you were sending for the Dairy League commercial got a job, you'd get paid, but you had the expense of doing all the phone calls. You could be on the phone all day and not book anyone. So I made more money out of doing their website, and it was just generally keeping things up to date, and it was all tables based as well. So they was hundreds of CVs. Every client on there had a CV on there, and it was all done in tables, and it was quite a big maintenance job really. But from then on, I just stopped. I just wasn't making enough money in casting whatsoever, so I stopped doing that, and just it coincided with my mum's best friend's sister's son coming over from Australia, and he has a web development firm in Australia, and he's always been really successful. And he had his laptop out all the time when we were all sitting in the kitchen having cups of tea and gin and tonics and whatever. He'd sit there with his laptop, and I just be absolutely enthralled with what he was doing. I was like, it looked so bizarre because it was all code, and he was using Dreamweaver at the time. It was about 1998, I think. And it just looked so interesting. I just got into it. He gave me a copy of Dreamweaver, and I just learnt from there, really. I did everything in the code view, as you should have done. And I already knew HTML from previous goings on with GeoCities, which I've spoken about in the Boag World podcast. Long story short about my friend, we used to change all her images to pictures of transvestites on GeoCities, but it was really hard to navigate around GeoCities, so I learnt the HTML code to change everything. So I already knew that side of things, so it was just sort of a progressive thing, really.
And what made you make the decision to go freelance? You went straight freelance at 19 and started uni.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I've come from a family where we're quite business minded. My granddad, who sadly passed away a couple months ago, he had such a business mind. He was so inspirational to be around because he could just make money where you didn't think there was money to be made, and he was just phenomenal. The stories he's got from being a young boy, he'd just buy hundreds of tickets. Like, he bought out the whole of a New Year's Eve party, bought all of the tickets, and then he sold them all to all the people who wanted these tickets for like £5 extra, made a ton of money. My dad has got his own business which he ran with my granddad, so I've kind of been brought up around, I think it's where I've been brought up around it all going on around me, and seeing my dad do his accounts and seeing my granddad come over and talking about business stuff. And I just decided, I didn't think it was that big a step. I was still living at home with my mum and dad. I just thought, why not? It's not a big deal. I'm not making any money in casting, so it's got to be worth a shot. I've got no overheads. Why not give it a go? And started getting clients fairly early on, but it was because I was way too cheap. I was way too cheap at the beginning. But weirdly enough, I had about 20 clients actually when I started out, and that was quite a lot, but it was because I was too cheap. It wasn't, and the work I was putting out wasn't of a great standard, because it was all literally it was mainly logo designs actually. And some of the clients that I had from way back then I still have today. I've just finished a web development job for one this week, so sometimes doing cheap work pays off, but I wouldn't condone it.
You wrote a blog about that as well, didn't you? Not so long ago, if I remember right.
Yeah, I would. I don't agree with doing super cheap work, even though that's how I started out. It's just but at the time the web industry wasn't really what it is today. You didn't really have the support. You didn't have Twitter, you didn't have Facebook. There was no easy way of communicating with other web designers. So it was kind of like there was no one to tell you that it was wrong. So you just found your own way, whatever worked. But if I was doing it from the start, I think that's why it's taken me quite a long time. That's why I've got quite a lot of clients who people say, oh God, you've got such bad luck with your clients. And I think that is because I started off the wrong way, and that's followed with me, and luckily it's probably only in the last 18 months that I've generally getting rid of that calibre of client and getting a different one in. But I strongly believe that it's because I started off a bit on the wrong footing.
I think it's quite a common thing as well if you're doing freelance work to start off cheap to try and build up your portfolio, because you've basically got nothing to show for yourself, have you, initially, and you need to build that up. But it's finding that balance, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I shared an office when I started out, when the business got too big to be in my mum and dad's back bedroom. I rented an office and then had another guy come in and rent with me, and he would just sit and do design after design for the site point competitions, is it? The marketplace thing?
Yeah.
But basically they just submit loads of people submit websites, and then the person picks the best one.
99 designs.
It's similar to that, yeah, but SitePoint has got its own version of it, I think, in the forum. And he just used to sit all day doing that, and he
So much
never made
effort.
any money.
Yeah.
So much effort for nothing.
Okay, so you're doing quite well with You Know Who Design. Where do you see yourself in the future?
I'd really love to get into speaking more, because my background has come from like an acting side as well. It's kind of quite natural to me. I don't feel like it's a horrible thing to get up and speak in front of people, and I'd kind of like to go to loads of different conferences around the world. There's an expression engine one coming up, I think it's in the Netherlands or something. I'd kind of like to get on that circuit, but the trouble is you've got to have so much capital behind you to go to all of them. You could spend a bloody fortune on them because it's not just the conference, it's the hotel and the food and the travel and everything else. And I'd really like to get into doing conference stuff, really, but I'd be quite happy doing what I'm doing now. I love my job, and I love the sort of clients that I'm getting in now, so I'd be quite happy if I was still doing this in 10 years' time, but maybe have Ruby on Rails under my belt.
Okay, cool. So for people who are probably just starting out and looking to start their own business, like what you've done, and go for it, do you have any top tips, any advice for those kind of people?
I think the biggest one is inland revenue. Because I don't think many people realise from the minute you take your first pound or dollar or whatever, well, it would be pound if it's the inland revenue for England, the inland revenue can actually fine you straight away £100 if you don't register to say that you are a business within the first 30 days of trading. They can fine you £100, and that's what happened to me.
Oh dear.
But apart from that, I think it's just you've got, although it goes against what I've just said, but I think I started off wrong. I think you have got to be picky with the way that you portray yourself at the start. I think you have got to portray yourself as bigger than you might be at the start, because no one really wants to work with perhaps startups have got a bit of a bad name, especially in web design. I've known a few who have just gone completely AWOL and bust and have left clients in the lurch with loads of projects. But I think the main thing is don't be afraid to be picky at the start with who you take on as a client, because some of them can just wear you so thin. When I started out, I had a client who I was due to go to Spain at 8 o'clock. I was due to leave for the airport at 8 o'clock in the evening, and I had the client up the office, and it was still 6:15, and I hadn't found my passport or anything, and he was being so demanding. And when I look back at the money he was paying me, he had no right to be that demanding whatsoever, and it was because I allowed it to happen that it happened. And I just think that's the biggest thing, is if you can afford to be picky about the people you take on at the start, you'll thank yourself later on for it.
And what advice would you give to people? There's a perception, especially with young designers who are just starting out, that they have to lower the prices because they're a young designer and they have to kind of prove themselves. You said you started out when you were 19. How did you find? Did you pitch for work? Did you approach companies to do websites, or did people come to you?
I think I've been quite lucky in that all of my work has come from recommendation right from the start. And obviously everyone has that moment when you look back on work you've done like 5-6 years ago and you think, Jesus, did I do that? And you think, oh, I can't believe. But it's a learning process. And what was the question?
The question was, if you're a young designer, how do you get credibility for what you're doing?
Oh, yeah, I think the biggest mistake I see in perhaps people who've gone to college or even university, I get a lot sent into me, even though I work on my own. I get a lot of CVs sent into me, and the biggest mistake I see is that they stick with what they've learnt at college, and they put out all this wacky, it's generally band art actually. I think they get really into doing like band art design, and it's generally quite gothic looking. And I had, when I had my office, I had a couple of work experience people up, and I said to them, is this what you do at college, or are you given any real world examples of stuff to design? And they said no, basically this is what they do. And I think the best thing, if you're trying to get a job as a young person, or even if you're just starting out, would be to take something high profile, like, I don't know, like the Conservative logo that was redone recently. Take something like that and put your own slant on it and say, well, this is what I would have done, so that it actually shows like a real world example of work, because I just don't think that they really grasp that it's all very well having this portfolio that you personally like, but if you're taking that into an agency, or if you're showing that to a potential client, it doesn't show them anything of what you can do for them.
Okay.
And I think, yeah.
Leading slightly away from that, other than anything in your career, any high points? And what would you say the best thing that's happened to you in your career has been?
This is going to sound really cliche, but I'd actually say Twitter.
Twitter?
Yeah.
I meant that sound like Twitter! No, I didn't mean it like that, I meant Twitter.
Yeah, and it's going to sound really strange, but I went straight from having the office to working back at home again, and that was quite a transitional period for me, because I'd been used to being in an office environment where we were very friendly with the people next door. I had a girl working for me, and then she moved up to London to be with her boyfriend, and it coincided with me and Stuart buying the house, so I moved the office to here, and it was quite a weird time, because it was quite lonely, and I'd been on Twitter a couple of times, and then it was suddenly that moment where I thought, actually, there's like a whole community of web people here, and we're all practically, there's some people who do work in businesses, but we all practically work on our own, or there's a lot of people who are in the same boat as me, and it just felt like I wasn't completely alone all day, and that if I had a problem or anything, I could just say, oh look, blah blah blah, this is what's happened, and there'd be a wealth of information out there, and I think it's really changed the way that I do things, and I've met some absolutely amazing people from it, and it's just nice to have people who whose books are on your shelf, who you can just talk to, and they're just normal people, and I just find that concept really, really lovely. And I think the web industry is so unique in the sense that we all help each other. We don't actually see one another as competition. Everyone helps, and I find that it is a strange concept, because I'm sure there's no other industry in the world that thinks in that way.
I can relate to that entirely, because I'm the same.
Yeah, I think Twitter's an amazing tool.
Is there anything work-wise that you're particularly proud of that you produced or appeared?
I'm happy with everything. I'm such a perfectionist. I think it's complete. I'm quite underestimated with how picky I am about certain things, especially when it comes to design. I will sit there and just shift stuff from one side to the other and then move it back. And I'm proud of everything that goes out of the door. I wouldn't, or out of the email or inbox or whatever you want to call it, but I wouldn't send anything out unless I was actually happy with it. So I'm happy with everything, and I don't think I would like to work with big blue chip companies because of design by committee and everything else. I'd rather work for the small to medium sized and startup businesses. So in that sense, what I do is sort of all in the same pot. It's all this sort of similar client base, and there's not really one thing that I can pick out and think, oh yeah, I'm really proud of that, because I'm proud of everything. That sounds really bad.
No, that's good. It's great that you're proud of everything that you've done. It's good.
Don't get me wrong, there's a few dodgy sites lurking from a while ago.
You don't want to mention. We'll link some below your video.
We'll roll on.
So you mentioned don't press yourself too low, and online revenue. Make sure you declare yourself and everything. Is there anything else you would advise people to avoid? Any big...
Trying to do too much from the start. I think that's a really big faux pas that freelancers think, that they've got to do everything. And in actual fact, when I'm looking for a freelancer, I want one that specialises in something. I've been looking for Symfony developers. I don't want a Symfony developer that also does a bit of PHP and a bit of Ruby and a bit of this and a bit of that. I want someone who is just a Symfony developer. And I think that comes from a lot of the university and places that are teaching web design are actually doing it in modules, which actually makes you have a little bit of everything, rather than specialising in one field and going for it. And I think that's what I would say to people, is just specialise in one thing and just go down that road rather than trying to do everything.
Okay, that's really good. Hopefully people will find that interesting, and thanks for taking the time.
Possibly not, but